The lonely corner table. She never expected a simple cup of coffee to change both their lives forever. Mia froze, coffee pot in hand, as she spotted him again, the billionaire who'd been coming in for 3 weeks straight, always alone at that corner table, always staring at the empty chair across from him. Today, something in his eyes seemed different. Broken. What Mia didn't know was that he'd just made a decision that would shock the entire city. "Coffee, sir?" she asked, approaching his table. James Harrington looked up, his steel blue eyes rimmed with red. "Please," he said, his voice barely audible. As she poured, she noticed the wedding band he kept twisting around his finger and the faded photograph peeking from his wallet, a stunning woman with a smile that could light up the darkest room. She was beautiful, Mia said before she could stop herself. James stiffened. "How did you?" "I'm sorry," she backpedaled. "I shouldn't have." "No," he interrupted, surprising them both. "It's just, no one's talked to me about Claire in months. Everyone's too afraid." "Afraid of what?" His laugh was hollow. "Afraid of the big bad billionaire falling apart, I guess." What Mia couldn't possibly know was that James wasn't just any billionaire, he was the man who'd secretly been buying up the entire block, including the struggling diner where she worked. "Sometimes falling apart is the only way to rebuild," she said, then added with a small smile, "At least that's what my grandma always said." Smart woman. She was. Mia's eyes drifted to the window. "Like your wife, I'm guessing." James nodded, his throat tight. "Today would have been our 20th anniversary." The diner door chimed, and a man in an expensive suit walked in, scanning the room until his eyes locked on James. His face darkened. "Your 10 o'clock is here," Mia observed. "Not my 10 o'clock, James muttered. "My past coming back to haunt me." The man approached, his voice low but intense. "You can't do this, James. You'll destroy everything we've built." "I think you mean everything I've built, Richard." James didn't even look up. "And I'm done discussing it." Richard leaned closer. "Claire wouldn't have wanted." James stood so abruptly his chair crashed to the floor. "Don't you dare speak her name." The entire diner fell silent. Mia stepped between them, coffee pot still in hand. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Richard's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, sweetheart." "And you have no idea how hot this coffee is," she replied evenly. "Or how accidentally clumsy I can be." After Richard stormed out, James picked up his chair, his hands shaking. "I apologize for that." "No need," Mia said. "Though I'm guessing there's a story there." "There is." He hesitated, then asked, "When does your shift end?" "In about an hour." "Why?" "Because I'd like to tell you that story, if you're willing to listen. And because for the first time since Claire died, I actually want to talk to someone." What James didn't tell her was that the papers in his briefcase would change everything, for him, for the diner, and especially for Mia. Over the next weeks, their conversations became the one thing James looked forward to each day. He learned about her dreams of opening her own restaurant someday, about the grandmother who raised her, about her struggle to make ends meet. And she learned about Claire, how they'd met in college when James was broke and determined, how she believed in him when no one else did, how cancer had taken her far too young. "She made me promise something before she died," James confessed one rainy afternoon. "She made me promise I wouldn't stop living." "Have you kept that promise?" Mia asked softly. His eyes met hers. "Until recently?" "No. Not even close." What he couldn't tell her yet was that Claire's final letter to him, the one he'd only found courage to open on their anniversary, had contained one last request that would upend everything. When Richard returned with lawyers and threats, James finally revealed the truth to Mia. He wasn't there to close the diner, he was there to save it, to transform it into the community space Claire had always envisioned, with a culinary school for underprivileged youth attached. And he wanted Mia to run it. "Why me?" she asked, stunned. "Because you remind me of her," he admitted. "Not in looks, but in spirit. In kindness. In seeing people for who they really are. I'm just a waitress." "No," James said, taking her hand. "You're the woman who saved me when I was drowning. Who reminded me what it means to care about something again." 6 months later, as they stood together at the grand opening of Claire's Kitchen and Culinary Academy, James looked at Mia, not with romance, but with something equally powerful, profound friendship and shared purpose. "She would have loved you," he said quietly. Mia squeezed his hand. "I wish I could have met her." "In a way, you have," James replied. "Every time you believe in someone who's lost their way. Every time you see beyond the surface to what matters." The night before the grand opening, James had found himself back at that corner table, alone with his thoughts. The diner was empty except for Mia, who was putting final touches on the new menus. "You know what's crazy?" she said, sliding into the chair across from him, Claire's chair. "A year ago, I was serving you coffee and wondering if you'd ever smile again." James looked around at the transformed space. "I never told you what was in Claire's letter, did I?" Mia shook her head. He pulled out his wallet and carefully extracted a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases from countless readings. She wrote, "My dearest James, when you read this, I'll be gone, but you won't be. That's the point. Your heart is too big to die with me. Find something that makes that heart beat again. Find someone who sees the man I fell in love with, not the empire you built. And when you do, share your fortune in ways that matter." Tears filled Mia's eyes as he continued. "She knew me better than I knew myself," James said. "She knew I'd retreat into work, into money. She knew I'd need someone to pull me back." "She sounds wicked smart," Mia said, using the Boston slang that always made James smile. "The smartest," he agreed. "And she'd be so proud of what we've built here." What neither of them expected was the impact Claire's Kitchen would have on the community. Within a year, they'd graduated their first class of culinary students, 15 young people who'd never had a chance before, now employed at top restaurants across the city. Richard had tried to fight them, of course. He'd filed lawsuits, spread rumors, even attempted to bribe city officials to deny their permits. But James had something Richard never understood, a purpose beyond profit. "He called me yesterday," James told Mia on the Academy's first anniversary. They were sitting at his corner table, now marked with a small plaque that read, "Where second chances begin." "Richard? What did he want?" Mia asked, setting down 2 cups of the specialty coffee they now imported directly from farmers in Colombia, another of Claire's dreams fulfilled. "To apologize, believe it or not." James shook his head in disbelief. "His daughter applied for our program. She dropped out of the fancy college he was paying for and told him she wanted to be a chef instead." "No way." Mia laughed. "What did you say?" "I told him we'd consider her application like anyone else's, based on passion and commitment, not family connections." Mia raised her coffee cup. Claire would have loved that answer. "She would have," James agreed, clinking his cup against hers. "You know, I used to think grief was something to endure, to get through. Now I understand it's something that transforms you, if you let it." On quiet evenings, James still sometimes sat alone at his corner table, Claire's photograph beside him. But now, instead of drowning in memories of what he'd lost, he found himself making plans for what he could create next, a scholarship fund, a second location, maybe even a cookbook featuring recipes from students' diverse cultural backgrounds. And sometimes, when the light hit just right, he could almost see Claire sitting across from him, her eyes bright with pride, whispering, "Keep going. This is just the beginning." 3 years after that first cup of coffee, Claire's Kitchen had become a landmark in the city. Food critics raved about the innovative menu that changed seasonally, featuring dishes created by students under Mia's expert guidance. But what truly set them apart was their mission. Every meal purchased funded a scholarship, every catering job created opportunities. On a crisp autumn evening, as golden light streamed through the windows, James watched Mia teaching a young woman how to properly hold a chef's knife. The student, a single mother who'd been homeless just 6 months earlier, was laughing as she practiced her technique. "You've got it, Tanya," Mia encouraged. "That's chef level right there." James felt a presence beside him and turned to find Richard's daughter, Emma, now their star pupil and soon-to-be sous chef. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her confidence a far cry from the nervous girl who'd first walked through their doors. "The documentary crew is here. They want to interview you about the foundation." The Claire Harrington Foundation had become James's newest project, a nationwide initiative to create similar culinary academies in underserved communities. What had begun as one man's grief had blossomed into a movement. "Tell them I'll be right there," James replied. "And Emma?" "Your father called. He's coming to graduation." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? He's actually coming?" James nodded. "People can surprise you. Sometimes they just need time to understand what really matters." Later that night, after the crew had packed up their equipment and the students had gone home, James found himself once again at his corner table. The diner had changed, expanded, renovated, reimagined, but this spot remained sacred. Mia joined him, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "The offer from that publishing house came through. They want us to do the cookbook." "That's fantastic," James said. "Claire always wanted to write a cookbook." "I know," Mia replied softly. "That's why I think we should call it Claire's Table, Recipes for Healing." James felt his throat tighten. Perfect. A comfortable silence fell between them as they sipped their coffee, the kind of silence that only exists between people who truly understand each other. "You know what I realized today?" James finally said. "When I first started coming here, I was trying to hold on to the past, sitting at this table, staring at her empty chair. But Claire wasn't in that empty chair. She was pushing me toward the future." Mia smiled. "She still is." Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the city in white. Through the window, they could see people hurrying past, collars turned up against the cold. But inside Claire's kitchen, there was warmth, purpose, and the quiet miracle of lives being transformed. "I got a letter today," James said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "From a man in Seattle who read about what we're doing here. His wife died last year. He wants to start something similar in her memory." "So it spreads," Mia said softly. "Like ripples in water," James agreed. "One act of love creating countless others." That night, as James sat at his corner table, no longer alone, but surrounded by students, staff, and community members, he finally understood what Claire had meant in her final letter: "Find someone who makes you want to live again. It doesn't have to be love. It just has to be real." And looking around at the life blooming from loss, he knew he'd finally kept his promise. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more content that reminds us all that even in our darkest moments, connection can be our greatest light. Where in the world are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments below.